Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am wired in, ready to record these memories. How about you, Scott?
Yeah, I'm ready to party like it's 1999.
Oh, man.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are going to be talking this week about the James Cameron written and Catherine Bigelow directed Strange Days from 1995, starring an all-star 90s cast, pretty much. Quite a strong cast, actually.
Yeah, for
And-
sure. And this was sort of the heyday for all of them, and none of them went on to be the Hollywood stars that we thought they would.
No, there's a couple in here that sort of I know from other things. One in particular, in Ralph Fiennes.
Mhm.
But there's people in this that sort of have just become like an indie movie, like they lived that indie movie kind of thing, like Juliette Lewis and Tom Sizemore, and the biggest disappointment for me is Angela Bassett, who is great in this film, but never seemed to become a breakout star. She seems to be one of those people that sort of people often talk about, but never seems to have had the big breakout. But
Oh, she was in Malcolm X. She played Malcolm X's wife. She's fantastic. And, I think in her case, she should sort of got pigeonholed as, a woman who starred in black movies. And I think Hollywood in the 90s, today, if that had happened 20 years later, she would be, at the top of the box office. But I think this movie owes a lot to Natural Born Killers, which Juliette Lewis and Tom Sizemore are both in. And Juliette Lewis was really poised at this moment to be a really top movie star. And it's always been a mild surprise to me that she wasn't.
Yeah, I think there's often reports of her working with her being difficult at certain points and stuff, but I'm sure there's reasons. But before we get into it, let's give a plot, because this one took a little while to
Good luck.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to read this, and then let me see what you think. Strange Days. It's Christmas 1999 in LA, and tensions are high in a town about to erupt into violence. But people still want to party like it's 1999. Looking to take advantage of the party people is clips dealer Lenny Nero, played by Ralph Fiennes. In this 1999, a technology has been developed that is able to record a person's sensory information, and then another person can play back and experience the events using mini discs. These are clips. Clips are traded on the black market and so only accessible to the right client, someone rich and discreet. For Lenny, this includes giving clients a place to experience the clip, in one case hiring his friend Mace, Angela Bassett, and her limousine. As Lenny goes about his business, his friend Iris, Bridget Bako, is being chased down by two LA cops. After being shot at, Iris barely escapes on a subway train, also revealing that she is wired up to record clips. In disguise, Iris goes to Lenny, telling him she has something he needs to see. Too distracted by other matters in his life, like his car being towed and fawning over his ex-girlfriend Faith, played by Juliette Lewis, Lenny fails to see what Iris has. However, a contact passes him a fresh clip, and when he experiences it back, he is mortified to find he is seeing through the eyes of someone who rapes and kills Iris. Having seen where the crime took place, Lenny and Mace speed across town just in time to see Iris' body being taken away. Lenny and Mace share the clip with best friend, private investigator Max Pieter, Tom Sizemore. Unable to find a source for the video, Mace deduces Iris must have left something for Lenny in his car. The two find his towed car and the disc with a clip on it. Before they get a chance to see it, Mace and Lenny are confronted by the two cops that chase down Iris, Steckler and Engelman, played by Vincent D'Onofrio and William Fichtner. They barely get away and find a safe place to experience the clip. It shows how, on the night she was chased, Iris was with rapper and black activist Jericho 1. The car is pulled over by the two cops, and after a minor argument, Stickler shoots and kills Jericho. Jericho's death has been adding to the powder keg of tension in the city, but if it's revealed that it was a cop that killed him, the city would descend into war. Mace wants to go public with it, stating a war might be what is needed. Lenny is more cautious and also concerned about ex-girlfriend Faith, as she was close with Iris, and Faith is also now with Jericho's manager, Philo Gant, played by Michael Wincott. Confronting Faith with the information, she explains she knew more than they did. Philo learned of the information on Iris's disc and was more concerned that his clients would learn that he uses clip technology to keep an eye on them. He wanted to destroy the disc and stop Iris from talking, so sent the killer. Faith explains that she is safe for the moment as she is also being protected by Max on Philo's orders. Despite his personal concerns, Lenny gives the disc to Mace to hand to the police commissioner at a party and make him see it. While Lenny goes back to Faith and to confront Philo, however, when he gets there, he finds Philo dead and another disc, this one showing a similar rape scene, but with Faith. But this isn't real, this is role play, revealing that Max and Faith are now indeed lovers. Max confronts Lenny and explains that Philo sent Max to kill Iris. Max then decided to frame Lenny for the murders so he could get away with Faith. A fight breaks out and Max is eventually killed when he falls over the hotel balcony. Down in the streets, Mace is spotted by Steckler and Engelman, who start to chase her down. She is able to disarm and subdue them, but other police see this as an attack and start to beat Mace. This one act kicks off a riot and Mace is able to break free, but then is faced with the commissioner, who has now seen the Jericho clip. He has Steckler arrested and Lenny and Mace are taken away for questioning to explain the whole affair as the new millennium arrives. There you go.
Yeah, quite a convoluted plot. And the other cop, gets killed trying to.
Well, he kills himself.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. He kills
himself rather than be revealed. It's
and they kill Steckler. He pulls a gun in a sort of like Die Hard, and gets killed by his fellow cops. Yeah, it's a very convoluted plot, but very resonant.
It is. There's a lot to this film, and it leans on so many tropes, or so I should say, it leans on so many genres. Because this makes me. It's obviously sort of like that cyber punk kind of thing. It's got noir, sort of like it reminds me of like Chinatown and I was going to say the central plot underlying it is a very film noir plot. Yeah. And all these other things that crop up, as you sort of said, it owes sort of like to so many different things. The question I had when I watched it, does it need to be this intricate? Because not only is the plot intricate, they then sort of layer on top of it. They layer on top of it all this sort of thing about the world building, about the tensions in LA, and it becomes a sort of a metaphor for race relations and all this other stuff. So there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of takeaway was it's not shot and not made like most movies.
No,
you don't feel. Oh, okay, we're in this scene. Here's the purpose of this scene. Yeah. You, as convoluted as that description was, it's very streamlined compared to the movie where you get a piece at a time. It's not clear at all what the point of a given scene is. Mm-hmm. You find out slowly that Lenny is an ex-cop, and and all of these kinds of connections, and what they really feel for each other, and all of this it's very organically done. Mm-hmm. And it has a feeling of sort of being one of these tapestry films that is not streamlined in terms of plot, where you have a feeling, oh, okay, that's this scene, here's what that scene is about.
Yeah.
And I think that is both to its advantage and to its disadvantage. Obviously, this was a bomb and almost derailed multiple careers, including Catherine Bigelow's.
Yeah, but I find that in itself interesting that, like I said, that this derailed Chris, because I went on when after watching it, I went on to multiple sort of those review aggregation sites, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, and sort of thing, and there are people that absolutely rail on this film. They're like, it don't waste your time, makes no sense, worst film I've ever seen, and I'm going like, what film were you watching? Because it's not. It makes total sense. Like, it's intricate and there's some coincidences, I think, that sort of, you have to put sort of prod and poke at. But I think this is. I was going to say it's ahead of its time. It's not ahead of its time, because this is the same as we sort of said, like, Chinatown, The Maltese Falcon, any of those sort of like gumshoe detective stories. It fits into that mold quite well, really. I think it maybe just wasn't of its era.
Well, I mean, in a way, this may be like the ultimate 90s sci-fi film. You cannot, all of those actors were at that point in the career. It is so reflective of the LA riots and of the Lorena Bobbitt thing, was an inspiration. O.J. Simpson trial was going on as they were filming. There was this fascination with not just violence in the media, and this comes out in my favorite film, Natural Born Killers, but also with race relations and, sort of, if this goes on, the whole super predator thing that was coming up. So it is very much of its time. I mean, my takeaway was that this is a splendid mess of a movie, and it's a complete mess, but it's also a masterpiece. Like, it is fascinating and intricate and so profoundly ambitious in a way that I don't know that any aspect works on a very high level, but it's got all of these aspects intertwined in this kind of insanely aggressive tapestry.
Yeah, I think it is a mess, and you're right. And I think, like I said, this is going to be one of the few episodes where I don't go, but I did it this way, sort of thing, because I don't think because actually I like the fact it works because it's a mess. There's a fundamental thing in this film, but like it being muddled. Like this, like you said, the information comes out in different bits and pieces. We get the information about Lenny being a cop later on. You're given snippets about even the case. Like, it's never entirely clear. Like, Lenny is confused. Ralph Fiennes' character Lenny is confused throughout the vast majority of this film. And you as a viewer in that position, like, you are supposed to feel slightly off kilter because you're not entirely sure. Like, it's not like he is given a case. This isn't a Gumshoe kind of film where he's gone, here's the case, this has happened, go figure it out. And it's sort of like, then the twists and turns. It's like the first 30 minutes, or maybe even the first 20 minutes of the film, like you have no clue what's going on. Like, it could be really off. In fact, what I will say is, because I love the way this film is shot. Like, I absolutely adore certain things in this film. It is very 90s, and it has certain things that I think probably could have been better. But the opening sequence of this film is a POV robbery that's done to look like a single take, and it starts in a car and goes through until a guy falls off at the top of a building and has all this stuff in it. Tom Sizemore's in it, so you sort of like, well, I know Tom Sizemore's in this film, and he's taking part in this robbery. So what does he do? Because he appears later. So is that important? Like, there's information you're given is important, and information that isn't important, and this other stuff. But I'm like, this is pretty ballsy to start with this POV thing that like just gives you nothing, and then it cuts to, oh, that's a clip, like Lenny's experiencing it. And then you get the information about clips, but you've like, so how does he get this information about like this robbery and this other stuff? And is that what he's investigating? This is robbery going to be important? No, not important at all. Like, it's,
it's just it's just a demonstration of clip technology, and it's and it's a smart, dramatic way of opening. But you're right. It's like, it's that sort of what I was saying about like, what scene am I in? Okay, this is a dramatic opening, but what's the takeaway? And it doesn't. This movie refuses, and I think to its credit, staunchly refuses to tell you what the takeaway is from scene after scene, exchange after exchange.
Oh, you have to be like, you get the monologue at the end. So by the end of the film, you get everything that's happened. Like,
Tom Sizemore sort of tells you,
pretty much.
Before I kill you, I shall explain everything that has happened.
There's a bit of that, and it's, again, I think it has to happen. But as a viewer, you are Lenny. Like, you have to work your way through this film, and you have to figure it out. Like, there's things, there are clues. You could easily figure this film out if you're watching it. But there are false clues. There's false directions and stuff. So it's an investigation in and of itself for the viewer.
Well, I think that, to your point, I think this contributes to why it failed. Expecting, there's so much that's fantastic in here, but expecting an audience it's enough to expect an audience to go along with this kind of like ambitious, winding narrative, a sort of Chinatown with, Total Recall fused into it, with, some sort of natural born killers jump cut, / Malcolm X sort of race relations thing fused into it, which I think is incredibly strong material. It gets to me very strongly. Although it has its own problems. But, you're asking the audience to do all of that. And especially from the start, those first 20 minutes are tough. But, you sort of sink into it. But then the other thing is Ralph Fiennes as Lenny is so unlikable as a traditional Hollywood type. Yeah. And this is one of the things that, I don't know that I've seen this movie all the way through, except for this time. I've seen parts of it a million times, but which only adds to the confusion, and you sort of have an impression like there's an intricate plot that feels super meaningful here. I must not have gotten it because I only saw, the last 30 minutes or something. But Ralph Fiennes he's so un-Hollywood here. He's so swarmy. He's got charm, but he also knows that he's charming, which is kind of off-putting, and he's using it to like con people, which is also off-putting, and he takes advantage of people. He feels swarmy in a way that even like Jack Nicholson in Chinatown does not.
Yeah, weirdly, like I say, one of the things was, we talked about the casting of this, and Ralph Fiennes is one where I was like, I know Ralph Fiennes from doing later in life. He's obviously Voldemort and done other things. I know him as M in the new Bond films. Great. But before this, so this is 95, like I know him from The English Patient, Schindler's List, very sort of like he's an English actor, of those sorts of things,
Serious roles only.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of and sort of, like period pieces and all that kind of stuff. So to see him in this, like, and to have him be that sort of like slimy thing, it's one of those things where, like, I could imagine this being, if this was done today, or even in the 90s, actually, if they really wanted this would have been a Bruce Willis. Like I'm thinking Last Boy Scout kind of thing, down his luck, playing that sort of gumshoe kind of character. So to have Ralph Fiennes come in and not have him not really hiding his English accent at all as well, and doing this, but then playing it like, I am going to play a sleazeball. Like, I've been burnt. Things have happened when you don't ever really get a full. And this is the other thing as well, to think, I'm going to use Last Boy Scout as another comparison piece. You never really learn why he left the police. It's implied that it is, this is one of the things that I find most fascinating is that there's no good guy. It's implied that he says he knows that the commissioner is straight-laced because he kicked him out.
And so the implication is like he was in some sort of corruption
Yeah.
scandal. Even this good cop, right, who is your hero, clearly was involved in some sort of pay for play or something.
Exactly, and this is where when you, for my comparison piece to sort of The Last Boy Scout, when you get to Bruce Willis's character in that, and he was thrown out of the Secret Service, you find out he did it because he punched out a governor because the governor was attempting to rape this girl, and so you're like, oh, so he is now this downtrodden, scummy private eye, he's a bit of a scumbag, but he reached this place because of he's still he is morally good. You know, and they show flashbacks. They constantly have it in. They have it in the film. They go, just so you know,
Yeah.
this is what really happened, and so you will support this character, despite him being curmudgeonly and you know grumpy. This is why. With the Ralph Fiennes character, you're never entirely sure, like that he's actually good. Like he seems to want to help his friends, but it's all sort of to his own. It's all sort of to his own benefit. Because even when
I mean, it's clear, like the stuff with Mace, it's with him sort of conning her Japanese clients, and then going. I mean, and she chews him out, and she's right about everything.
Yeah.
It's clear that he, like how good of a friend is he? He let Iris die. He's obsessed with Faith, but is that really friendship or?
Yeah, well, the thing is, he feels human. Like he doesn't have to be heroic. Like he is sort of like he is a proper anti-hero. Like he keeps getting pulled into this mystery and to resolve this thing, but he never really does anything heroic. Even at the end, as I say, like he is massively reluctant to give over the disc that shows Jericho 1's death, and he gives this bullshit reason to Mace about race riots, burn the city to the ground. But then he actually even acknowledges. But it'll also expose me in my black market, which will do me out of money.
Yeah, well, and also I want to trade this for Faith, for Faith's safety, and I'm obsessed.
Yeah, so he's not like a good guy, and I think that again is quite brave to be doing that. Especially when, and you say about the audiences, one of the things I've got this on Blu-ray, so one of the things I went away and I had a look at is the trailers. I'm always fascinated by looking at how the film was marketed. And this film was very much marketed in that vein of sort of like sci-fi action, 90s sci-fi action. Think Johnny Mnemonic or those mid-90s things. It ends with, there's like a scene, and it was used as a cover, as the Millennium goes off, a big screen with Ralph Fiennes' face on it and celebrating. You're like, oh, he's going to save the day. Yeah, that's not the film that people went in to see.
Well, it's like trying to sell Blade Runner 2049, and you're like, let's just put together some beautiful, the way to do that is let's just put together some beautiful shots with some, Vangelis or whatever, and give you look and feel. How do you do this, honestly, as a trailer, except that way? But with Fiennes, I think the Last Boy Scout comparison is apt, and I like that film, and there. This movie does have those. One of the ways in which it ages the most poorly is in its embrace of very specifically 1990s action movie tropes. But one of the things that always bothers me in movies, especially like Last Boy Scout, is where you see characters drinking. Or you see them like doing drugs or drinking, and they never look drunk, right? They might they're performing like they're drunk, but they look like they just got out of bed and the makeup just finished. Ralph Fiennes looks like he is strung out through this whole movie. He does not, and he looks confident. There are moments he can put on that poise, but he looks a mess, and you really feel that. It's not like. This very well made up, but where you see it's The Walking Dead. Where are you getting your hairspray, women? Where are you getting this makeup? Ralph Fiennes looks a mess.
Yeah, and I like the fact that again, I think Blade Runner also is a good example or a good comparison piece of this thing of saying like this film, as you say, sort of like has specific kinds of characters in it. and it's not an action film. Like, this isn't Speed or, you know, Johnny Mnemonic or The Matrix. This isn't like one of those sort of cyber punk action films. This is a sci-fi film, not even like a hard sci-fi film. Like, it's based around a technology that it's one of those things, isn't it? It's a sort of a, what would they call it? I suppose speculative fiction. From a recent conversation, all they've done is introduce one piece of technology. Like, the rest is the same. It's just this technology. They say, oh, even that was built for the feds. It was built as a military application, and then has been co-opted into this black market entertainment thing. But nothing else is different. Like, you know, the fact that using mini discs is brilliant. So it's not like you know, flying cars and other stuff, but it still has this other feel. Like, the world, like, you are not seeing the bright day of Los Angeles. Like, you barely see daylight in this film. It's very dark. It's very dark, and so they're going for they're trying to achieve a Blade Runner look, but without changing the city.
Yeah, I think the Blade Runner comparison is apt because, you know, Blade Runner is also a bit of a mess, although more streamlined. But yeah, I mean, this is very obsessed with that sort of like look and feel, except that look and feel is all grimy. I mean, it means, and brilliantly so. I mean, it makes Blade Runner look like Star Trek by comparison. and you know, the other thing is this sort of depiction of the constant riot. This depiction of every time they're driving limos through the streets of LA, through, you know, nice areas of LA, and there are people overturning cans, and there are cops responding, and shootings going on, and it's just like, that is just the background of everything, and I love that. It definitely is problematic because it's sort of like, yeah, you know, those people who rioted, you know, they're just gonna keep doing it. There's definitely, I mean, we'll get into some of the race issues, but I mean, it definitely plays into white fears about the LA riots.
One of the interesting things is, and again, like, I actually watched it like 1.5 times for this, just because things were going on. But one of the things I noticed is, like, all that stuff in the background, that sort of, like you say, the perpetual rioting or the perpetual like tension, it's shorthand, and I think this is one of the interesting things. Is they're trying to show that there's a city. They're trying to show that this city is at almost like at breaking point. But it's not in the foreground. Like, it becomes a part of the foreground towards the end of the film. But I can imagine, like, when they've done the production design on this, like, we need to show that there is a powder keg. Like, there is a shitstorm coming. How do we do it? And this is the best way to do it, because we're already 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So I can't add scenes in, and we don't want to build a new character. So this is it. And I think I can feel that that's the choices they've had to make to make sure it lands with these audiences, that this city is still suffering from these events. But it does feel a little bit lumpy at times, a little bit overplayed, I would say. But then, because they're also trying to justify at the end of the film, there becomes a bit of a ticking clock again at the end of the film, because they're going to introduce the military to control the.
Well, they do. I mean, you see tanks in the streets. I mean, it's fucking Ferguson, man.
Yeah, and that's it. But so they're trying to sort of have this whole thing, like, that. You know, there's another film playing out in the background. You know, there's another film that's like where there's a real cop trying to prevent something else from going on, another way of this happening, but this film's not interested in that, in the sense of, like, it's not in the foreground, it's complete background. And whilst it is lumpy, and we'll get to it, I like the fact that it doesn't ever become like a massive talking point for the characters, but they are like, oh no, we live with this shit. Yeah, and so we're just going to live our lives. Like Mace, as you say, sort of like drives her limousine and through these places, and, you know, even like Tom Sizemore, Max sort of has to be, you know, he's a private investigator throughout all this. It's all just part and parcel.
Mhm.
And I kind of like that they've tried to make it just a background.
Yeah, and I think the closest it gets to a commentary on that is when Max says something like, look around, all of us could go at any time. So you might as well enjoy yourself and indulge in, he's obviously talking about, rape and murder, and making snuff films of it,
Yeah.
but, snuff holodisc kind of, memories. But that does seem to be, there is a sort of like desperation to all of the characters. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say about Ralph Fiennes is that you find out later that he met Faith when she was like a prostitute and a junkie, and the level of this is another way in which this movie just refuses to play Hollywood conventions. The characters are so down and out, with the exception of Faith's new lover, who is running a record label. Outside of that, basically, and Jericho 1, who you see a little bit of, outside of that, everybody is just totally down and out.
Yes.
And to the point where, like, I'm a disgraced ex-cop. I'm hanging around with junkie prostitutes and falling in love with them. Like, yeah, we're at a certain level of society at that point. And I think the terror going on in the streets plays into that, this sort of like, this is a real dystopia, but it's a dystopia that is very close to reality.
Yeah. And again, talking about sort of Ralph Fiennes' character Lenny meeting Faith. One of the things that's most interesting about his character as well, like he met her when he was undercover. So he was like a narcotics cop, and he falls in love with her. But the fact of the matter is, he was also using the clip technology to record her during a number of sort of encounters. Sometimes when they're out roller skating, sometimes when they're in bed together. I'm assuming those were supposed to have been submitted as evidence or something, because he is. It's acknowledged like that's when he was a cop. When he was in the police. But he's kept those and he uses them as sort of like what would be in other films, the home video moment, and so this obsession, he is just, he met her under false pretenses, and she's obviously then left, and it may even be because of this relationship that he was pushed out of the police. You don't know, but he still has this obsession, and he's clearly willing to sort of steal evidence and secretly film people. Like, he's got no qualms about people's sort of privacy or even the people he loves. And like you say, he's a difficult character to get a beat on in that sense of being the hero.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I wanted to get back to this kind of like griminess and think about the ways in which this is post Boys in the Hood, right? So it's not just the LA riots, it's not just natural born killers and this sort of like, it's like you go back to Network and you think, boy, that was so on the nose and yet so naive about that it would change anything, right? Like, we are way past that now, and we just take it for granted, right? Like, Fox News is so far beyond that, let alone reality TV. We're in an era that had seen, in which white America, the average middle class, or upper middle class, roughly educated white person, had seen stuff like Boys in the Hood, was getting more involved in, and saw not just the LA riots as scary and reactionary the way, riots in the 60s scared America, but also identified with Black America, because we had all seen the beating of Rodney King, and we all knew, people felt different things about it. Some people would justify the cops, but plenty of people understood this was a beating that was absolutely extrajudicial, absolutely criminal, and saw the LA riots as both completely shocking, but also a a moment of expression of legitimate rage at a culture that had forgotten, Black Americans, especially inner city Black Americans. And so, and this movie clearly reflects those things. And you have, when he goes and hides out with her family, it's like, oh, it's like, this is a scene out of Boys in the Hood. Or Friday, like this is got a culture shock, but it's not a culture shock to Ralph Fiennes. I mean, so I think this background, this milieu in which this film is made, it reflects all of them so strongly.
Yeah, it does, and I agree, because you only see Mace's family very briefly. Like, there's one scene that's sort of like, say, but and again, one of the things I like about this film is that it's not, they haven't gone hard sci-fi. It's not like, they're not trying to present Back to the Future 2's 2015. It's not, hoverboards and crazy costumes. Like, the kids that she gets out, like, her son and daughter, I think, is the sister or whatever, the people that she gets out of her house and like, look, you've got to go for somewhere else safe. Like, we're hiding out here, like, it's not safe. Like, yeah, they are feeling, they acknowledge that, like, this is dangerous, and it's sort of they can't, just do certain things, and it feels like you say it's contemporary. It's a sci-fi film about this weird technology, but it's contemporary, and you do sort of feel that throughout, and again they do it though, because again, this is an alternate 1999, like, by keep reminding you that it's that sort of, this is real. The technology is one thing, but Skunk and Nancy appears at the end. And so you sort of have these things where you're like, oh yeah, I remember that band, and that's cool. But it's like, it still sets in this scene where you're like, yeah, there's this boiling pot of things going on beyond this story. And but I want to talk about the police. We'll talk about the race relations, I think, off the back of it. But there's this thing about police in this film as well, and you and I have talked about this before, that there's sort of Hollywood films lionizes the police. And action films have been some of the biggest culprits of this, from Lethal Weapon to Die Hard to all these different films. Not in any bad way, not always in the worst possible way, but it lionizes also the rogue cop. This idea of doing the thing and sort of, this cowboy, thing, even from Dirty Harry.
You gotta go beyond. You gotta break the rules.
She's
keeping us down. If you gave me a gun and let me kill who I wanted for one day, I could clean up this hellhole.
That's it. Yeah, you don't know what it's like. Yeah, pen pusher. It's that sort of thing, and this takes that and really sort of like tries to upend it by going like, no, rogue cops are dangerous. Like,
yes,
and the police is massively corrupt. Like, yes, you've got this commissioner at the top who's very straight-laced, but he has clearly got little to no control over what's happening in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like that they've got that, and it struck a chord with me recently. I mean, I know that America's gone through this thing at the moment, and it's happening here as well. But defund the police and police brutality. But I'm sat watching this film this week, in a week where a police officer has been arrested and obviously has now been sentenced for using his position, is sort of his credentials to arrest a woman, kidnap the woman, rape and kill that woman. And in response to that, response to the sentencing, the police have given advice to women to say, well, if you're being arrested by a single male officer, challenge that male officer, or call for other police, and another police officer.
How to prepare yourself for your kidnapping and rape and murder by the police department.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Be prepared. Have your anti-police rape, defense kit ready to go.
And that's pretty bit. And further advice was sort of things like, that women need to be more street smart and know their legal rights when coming to be arrested. And it's like, this is all baffling. And then the Met has put in place, like, well, to make sure this doesn't come in, these things don't happen again, we're going to have more internal police judiciary. So the Watchmen watching the Watchmen again. And so with that going on in the background in Britain at the moment, it felt like watching these two cops, and it's not race, that was obviously isn't race relations, it's different, but watching these two cops and then the sort of, not so much the cover up, well, there is this, they want to cover it up, but the instant sort of the thing at the end when Mace is attacked and stuff, this instant thing of like, no, you're the one in the wrong. And then the beating sort of felt like, yeah, not only is this isn't about race. This is just the police. The police are a fraternity, and it could be a black man, a black woman, a white woman. Probably not a white male. We're probably the safest of anyone. But if you're considered a threat to that fraternity, like you are in real problems, and
well,
that's what
I want to push back on that because I think it is about race.
This film definitely is. But.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's about race in real life too. And that's not to say that police brutality, can't be colorblind, right? Quote unquote, whatever the hell that is. But not to say it can't happen to white people too, or to any other ethnic group. It does, but you see when Mace is fleeing, the way in which Ralph Fiennes can get in anywhere, right?
Yeah.
He's you and I, right?
Yeah.
He could get in, I've waltzed into so many hotels, I can't even tell you the number of VIP areas I've just walked into. He's that guy. She cannot do that. And not only that, but when she's running from the police, you see the way in which she's coded as a criminal. And I think the reality is, race is, police can do this, especially to people without power. And when you take power away based on, class, race, all of these other things, and race is a huge one, then you can be completely in the right and you're just moving through a crowd quickly, not just cops, but, society, because of the way we've coded black bodies, are going to assume, oh, that must be the criminal. I'm scared, right? That's a woman running, from murderers. I think that's really quite brilliant.
No, you are right. You are definitely right. There is, 100%. There's the race is a factor, and if I were, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I do not feel under threat from the police, but I know that other groups do, whether that be race or gender. But there's a great moment you say about the Mace thing. One of the things I'll highlight is at the very start of the film when you see Iris being chased down by Steckler and Engelman, they get called in. There's over the radio. It's sort of like, we know you're doing this. It's been, what are you doing? And Steckler calls in and says, black male, aggressive, acting suspiciously. We're handling it. And the radio goes, all right, and leaves them to it. Like, he's not going to, it's the fact that they're chasing down this white woman, but the fact they report it in that it's a black male that they're chasing down, and the person on, I don't know, the radio controls like, yeah, fair enough. As you say, it's coded. It's just that thing of like, oh, they're doing that. That's fine. That's the expectation, and they're able to manipulate the system just using that simple wording as well. Right at the start of the film as well, sort of tells you exactly where this is going to go.
That's a great point. And that same kind of coding is used to, I was scared for my life. Well, that in the US, that justifies killing whoever the hell you wanted to kill. But I know cops who I think are good people. They have a culture, and my problem is with the culture and how they assume things, even talking about politics. And that's often true. But so, I mean, I don't want to say all cops are terrible, but I've grown up my entire life with stories about people, especially young black men, who committed suicide in the back of a squad car with a gun by shooting themselves in the back. Yeah. And this is not an isolated incident, right? I mean, and you can get away with that kind of stuff, especially in a lot of jurisdictions. Now, that's not the average cop's experience, right? But those especially bad actors, who have the most complaints, get protected by the rest.
Mhm.
So, there is a scene, especially when she's being beaten, and all of those cops are, they're the same cops who are going to take those guys into custody and ultimately shoot, which I don't believe would ever happen.
Yeah.
But when they're kicking Angela Bassett, I mean, I can't imagine anyone not being filled with rage at that scene, which is obviously Rodney King, right?
Oh
And,
yeah. The way it's done. One of the things I'd like to to point out on this is she subdues. We're going sort of around the houses, but she subdues Engelman and Steckler. Like she beats them. Like it's a great scene. Like she kicks ass. Like I love Angela Bassett in this film.
Yeah.
And she doesn't kill them. She handcuffs them to each other. And it's that sort of and it's that point I think that Engelman kills himself. Like it's that thing of like, I don't want to get found out for this. He's the better of the two, marginally. But it's the fact that like she's like, look, I'm trying to explain. I'm getting down. I'm trying to explain, and like
she's complying.
She's complying, and it's one police officer comes in and tells her no and hits her over the back with his baton, and instantly like 7 more just appear and just start railing on her. Like they do not stop to ask, like, what's going on? What's the point? They just start coming in and wailing on her, and they're all like, get down, stay down, and I'm like, she's down, and you are still like led, and it is hard to watch.
All you need is for one of them to apply a chokehold, and you have Eric Garner. All you need is for one to step on the back, and it's Mike Flynn.
Yeah.
That thing is, it's like what we see. They call it contagious fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're like, cops will be confronting somebody. They've got a gun ready. Some of them, the gun is still holstered, but now one cop, swung the baton in that scene. One cop fires, and now all as in that moment is, oh, this person is fighting the cops. The cops are now firing. My buddy is now firing. Now it's us versus them. Now it's a military situation.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, all the guys are wearing riot gear. They've got riot shields and all that kind of stuff. And it is quite sort of because it's a kid that breaks it up. I mean, not a young kid, but he's sort of like, I think he's like a teenager. Jumps on and he's like, "Whoa, get off her!" And that sort of instigates a wider fight,
sort of riot at the moment in which people are fighting the cops. I quite like that. At first I was like, I don't know if I buy this kid, but then I kind of like that it. But then I was like, no, I like that, right? That it's the kid who's just like, I can't take this anymore. What you're doing is unjust, and just jumps on the back of this cop. And seeing him, then the other people are like, yeah, you're right. F this, we're fighting these cops.
It's the sort of that thing that it unleashes the flood, and you see the barriers come down, and they run at the police and stuff. Oddly, I like the fact the military are like, no, not our fucking problem, and step back.
Probably more true than
yeah. But that whole sort of scene at the end is fascinating in that respect. If you get that thing, the one thing I would dink this film for, is Vincent D'Onofrio, and I would say that Vincent D'Onofrio, he obviously more recently has been sort of lauded for his performance as Kingpin on the Daredevil show. And in that, it was more about that swing he has from utter calm to, blinding rage. He's just too cartoony in this, and I think like he just comes across constantly like the most evil, sort of corrupt copper, all snarling the whole time.
Yeah,
and it's a bit too much. Where, like. When you watch the video back, everything from the very beginning, but when you watch the video back, when you see the killing of Jericho 1, like the way that they're sort of acting, like it should feel, I said I wasn't going to do this, but it should feel like it's a ramping up of tension, of frustration. Like him pulling the trigger at the end should feel like a shut up, like a full stop. But it doesn't. It feels like he's waiting for Jericho to stop talking so he can shoot him. It feels inevitable, and although it should feel sort of inevitable, it should be a build of tension to be like, is this going to happen? Like, and it's
You're
obvious.
right, and that's it's directed as a buildup of tension.
Yeah, but
and Jericho 1 is played that way.
But but
you're right.
D'Onofrio is the weak link in that scene, and in a lot of the scenes, he's just playing too arch. He thinks he's in Last Boy Scout.
I hadn't identified that, but I mean, and that scene felt off in exactly that way. But you're right about D'Onofrio there. I would say my criticism of the portrayal of the cops is that, I mean, despite everything I've said, I think overall it's a relatively nuanced portrayal. Nobody in this movie, outside of those two cops, right? But nobody in this movie is totally bad, totally good. I mean, the guy what's his name, who's got Faith hostage, basically.
Oh, Philo Gant.
Yeah, he's bad. I mean, ultimately, there are a few bad guys, but I mean, it's a pretty nuanced movie in which the good guys are pretty awful too.
Yeah.
And the one exception, and my complaint is that I like that the cops, and I would consider Ralph Fiennes as an ex-cop is also part of that conversation. My criticism is the commissioner, and I think that it's worth pointing out that Max has been defeated, thrown off a building by the time we see this stuff with Angela Bassett and the riot outside, which is like, we've passed the climax of this movie. What should be, right, according to traditional scripts, the climax. And there's this whole second climax, but it doesn't feel like, a Marvel second climax where it feels like, oh, you actually do care about this race stuff, and you're going to give us, this whole other thing. But the idea that the cops would shoot a fellow officer prior to him firing, and that is so neatly cleaned up, and that the commissioner has listened to, used this illegal technology to see the clip, and that he would arrest those cops on the spot. I don't believe any of that.
No.
But I also think it's very convenient because the movie wants to present this nuanced examination of culture and all of these different, this cross section of 1990s culture with millennial concerns. And it wants to not be utterly on the side of the protesters, right? It wants to portray a more nuanced set of characters. And yet its solution to, bad cops and to criminals, murderers in the police department is the good cops will take care of that. Yeah. All you need is a commissioner. You don't need structural reform, right? And the truth is those cops would never be put on trial.
No.
And if they were put on trial, they'd be found innocent, statistically.
But and this is where I think that I agree that the ending of the film feels they try to have and I wonder if this is notes from the studio, but they try to give it like an optimistic gloss at the end of the film. Like there's this little uptick of optimism at the end, because even the climaxes like themselves aren't like Ralph Fiennes. He doesn't get Faith, but it's that again thing of like, well, there's an acknowledgement that she was bad for you anyway. And it's really Mace that you should be with, but he doesn't really get Mace either. It's like, oh, we might get that in the future. So there's not even that sort of thing, but they do give you enough. And then obviously they kill D'Onofrio because Engelman, the Steckler character, because Engelman kills himself. And then, but it ends with them being taken away in the police. Mace is now being protected by the police and all this other stuff. And it ends with the 2000 celebration. Like you get to the new year, and then you sort of have this panning of everyone celebrating together, partying, and you see there's a woman kissing a soldier and all this other stuff, and it's like, this isn't the film I've just been watching. It's fine, and I'm not going to complain. It's a real bugbear. It's a minor nitpick, but that final thing is, I'm still going, what happened to the riot that kicked off 10 minutes ago? Like, did everyone stop to start kissing each other for the new year? Of course they bloody didn't. Like, this makes no sense. But again, like, I completely agree. And one of the things that I hate this in other films is the good captain, you know, or the one that steps in. Because I'm like, but the thing is, you might be the good commissioner. This still happened on your watch.
Right. And the press is going to make that point, right? You know, I mean, there are good politicians, there are good cops who we would agree with a lot of the criticism of it, of them for things that happen on their watch. Yeah. I mean, and I love the sort of, you know, 1999 flipping to 2000. You and I remember that as an event. Yeah. You know, and I love the way it's shot. But you're completely right, and I find myself thinking it's not just, you know, like, what happened to that riot with the fighting the cops? I mean, they're going to be arrests of half the crowd now, right? Because the commissioner's going to be like, yeah, you know, those guys are murderers, but these guys punched cops. That kid is going to jail too. Also, nobody cares. It's like bodies just fall from skyscrapers all the time. You know, nobody's concerned about that. And then also, what happens next week? Next week, you know, even if the cops try to hold on to the footage, right, the brain recording of this murder, Jericho 1 is like a tiny Malcolm X. I mean, he's a big deal nationally. He's like the most prominent. She calls him the most prominent black man one of the most prominent black men in America. When it's discovered that the cops executed him and that they are withholding footage of it, you're going to get those riots anyway, okay? And you're going to get massive social... I mean, the country is... the LA is already a powder keg. So they haven't prevented anything. I mean, you're right that it's this kind of like gloss of a good ending, but yeah.
It's one of those things where, like, this feels like, if you were to have this in history, if you were to be looking back at this in history, you know, 50 years from, you know, 2050, some hits, or 2100, looking back at it, 100 years in the future, this story is chapter 1. And it's like, these events happened. These two cops killed Jericho 1, and the evidence was found following these events. That then resulted in massive police reform and race riots across the country. That's the history. You know, what changed? What did politicians do? What did police reform come in? Or how did the police react to this? Did it reach court? Did it, you know, these are the things. Like, there's a whole, and I think really, when you watch this, and this goes back to those action tropes we were talking about, because it's the same with all these other films. You know, when you look at this film, they put a nice little bow on it. Don't, like, as you say, don't worry. The good cops will deal with it. Move on. You know, nothing else to see here. Move along. And you know, and Mason and Lenny are going to get together, and it's all going to be lovely and all this other shit. Probably not, but that's what you're supposed to take away from this film. They give you this thing of like they've had a ticking clock. You've reached it. It's 2000. You know, move on. But as you say, like, that never happens. So there's all these sort of like things. I think a film I really like that actually really deals with again directly with the LA riots. It's a film called Dark Blue with Kurt Russell and Ving Rhames. And again, in that, Kurt Russell plays a corrupt cop that uses any means necessary to get the bad guys, kind of thing, but then gets discovered for this killing that happened, and it gets investigated. And that literally goes through that thing of like, there's this thing happened. Now we're looking at all the ramifications and how that sort of, you know, that flash moment, that flash fire becomes a forest fire. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think, you know, there's almost like a moment in this where I thought the same. I was like, well, when this gets to the press, and because this is going to have to go to court, because although they're dead, you're going to have to explain why these two police officers opened fire in a crowded area on New Year's Eve, and what's been happened, and they've now got evidence of Jericho One's death. Like, yeah, there is going to be all kinds of things. I can imagine there's going to be sort of black activism groups with lawyers coming out to sue the Los Angeles Police Department. You know, there's books, there's all kinds of stuff going to happen out the back of this, and I almost want to see that.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the problem that I have, and I know you have, with a lot of films where it's the sort of like the denouement is the most interesting, or like what would happen next. Like, you successfully destroyed society. You were a dumb disaster movie, but I really can't stop imagining these subtle ramifications. I still like this film. I don't feel like that with this film. But, you know, first of all, in 2050, the first question is, whoever is doing the observing, are they underwater or have cancer yet from the effects of global warming? Because we've destroyed this planet to a remarkable degree. And then secondly, I think it's amazing how much we think these events are going to transform everything, right? I mean, we've had a lot of riots in this country's history. Ones that grabbed the national stage before the LA riots. You know, 94, 95, it felt like things were sort of coming unglued. There would be major change. I mean, we've had mass protests and rioting in the wake of, you know, a massive series of police killings in the last few years. You know, what has happened due to that? Really very little. Some liberal cities, right, are trying to defund the police or create, get rid of the policemen's union, create new sort of peacekeeping forces that also have therapists and people to respond to those kinds of calls. But that's a slow process, and that's in these liberal enclaves. Yeah, there's been no national police reform. Absolutely. I mean, there's been on local levels. I can tell you, like, St. Louis has changed how it did things a little, you know, but yeah, I mean, and what happens when that commissioner is forced to resign because he's a good guy? He's most likely going to fall on a sword in the ensuing scandal. And then we follow our characters going like, well, shit, you know, the cops are dead. There's been no police reform, and the commissioner, the only guy who would have ever stopped this, is now out as a result. How do we even understand this?
And that's the thing. So, like, you know, don't get me wrong, I do really like this film, but it does leave this thing of like, you get this out, and it's the Hollywood ending, isn't it? And you can't have a 10-hour film that then covers off, like you say, the political intrigue and the sort of the social ramifications of a film. But I often think about this with other films as well, you know, like daft films, like, you know, Beverly Hills Cop, when they're sort of racing around the city, sort of doing stuff, and it's sort of like you know, Eddie Murphy's completely out of jurisdiction in that film, still shooting people and stuff. You're like, no, I'm not sure. This would go to some sort of tribunal. Like, you know, I know it's an action film, and you're supposed to think about those things, but like, it's this thing of like the glossing over of the actual ramifications of these events. But this film wants you to think about that. Like, it's telling you that this is the thing, that there are going to be these things. Like, Mace even says it. Like, they actually say it. Like, we need to release this. Well, if you release it, it'll result in riots everywhere. Well, that may be a good thing. Okay, so does that happen? You know, it's out there now. So,
well, and I like that discussion. You know, and it's a sort of classic black-white stereotype, right? You know, the black person saying things need to change. Maybe some stuff needs to burn for people to wake up and change things, and the white person saying, that sounds really bad. You know? People are going to die, you know. But that's a nuanced, I mean, that's a stereotypical sides, but it's a nuanced conversation in which we're still having, right? About whether, you know, riots are the voice of the oppressed, and, you know, yeah, this is bad, but when the hell does the media come in when something's not being burned?
Yeah.
You can kill a whole lot of black kids before the media listens. But
Yes.
you set fire to one J.C. Penney and watch the national media descend.
And it's true. It is very true. And I think this is, calling that into question. I mean, like, and Mace acts as that character, isn't she? She's the one that sort of like, if she's doing anything in this film, like, she, like, you were right to say earlier on, like, weirdly, if they'd have switched this right at the ending round, and it had been Lenny that went to the police commissioner, like, I'm pretty sure he would have been listened to maybe more. Because yes, they hate each other, but they've got this past relationship. But it's just there is this sort of this feel, of what we should say is, as well, to highlight, Mace, when they do the separation thing, like, Mace is sent off with the thing. She has the evidence for this event, the killing of Jericho. And as you said, there's a double climax. It's well done. However, the fighty climax of the film, the punchy climax, which is what we get, is actually basically a sweaty love triangle between three white people.
Yeah.
And so there is that moment when you're a bit like, maybe, and again, this is 1995, I understand, but like, maybe even the casting of this could have been a little bit more, more interesting if the Mac character of Max, no,
Latin
I don't know.
Or something.
Just something.
But then you've got the whole thing of like the Latin killer, the
Yeah,
whole like Basic Instinct thing. Like, oh, glad you're including gay people. They're apparently homicidal maniacs.
Yeah, there's that. And I was wondering, maybe, I don't know. It's typical. The thing is, as well, the problem with it is, as you've said, Mace is the only sort of like likable character in this, and she's great in it. Everybody else isn't. So the moment you start to try and sort of make it more diverse, you do have that moment like, yeah, I'm trying to give some diversity, but the fact of the matter is they are all deplorable. So, equally, people in minorities and different sexual preferences could be pricks as well. But it needs to be sort of special. So it's I don't know. But yes, it's
Mike Phillips and I have this line about Necropolitan where we've debated racial inclusiveness and all of this stuff, and we agonize over it, and finally reach this line where, Mike said, "I'm not okay. I'm done worried about not having enough like Latinos being condemned to hell. Like that might not be the best representation. Like maybe we should not, worry about like, transsexuals can be psycho rapists and killers too. Damn it. We need more representation. That is not the problem with the transsexual community's depictions.
Yeah. It's a fine line, and I know people get, can be offended by it. So I'd be careful. But yeah, that love triangle.
Let's talk about that love triangle, because I mean, I think that, we've talked about a lot of layers of this movie, but we've not talked about this central love triangle, which is so key to it. And the key scene here for me is when Mace is sort of talking to him in her house, and there's so much fantastic dialogue in this movie, and Ralph Fiennes is amazing in his delivery of a lot of it, almost to the point where it doesn't come off as impressive, not to harp on them, but the Marvel shows can do a decent line and everybody goes, oh, that's amazing. Yeah. But Ralph Fiennes is delivering these amazing gems of lines, and it just comes off as like the seedy, depressed guy saying this. But he says, have you ever been in love with somebody who didn't love you back? And when they didn't love you back, did you love them any less? This sense of, I really quite like, I always have been fascinated by this idea that a lot of times in life, there's this thing of people, when you love somebody, it turns them off, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you get involved in these sort of chains where it's like, wait, okay, so you're buying me dinner, and I'm buying her dinner, and they're buying someone else's dinner, and it's like, really, really weird. And so, I mean, I like that. I think although he seems really obsessive to a point where we'd be like, me too. He's stalking her for half this movie. I do find this resonant and interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's the fact that, like, and again, it's never stated, but it is implied that Faith, that Faith is the reason he is out of the police. So, to me, and again, this might be just my headcanon, like, this obsession comes from, not only does he love her, and he clearly does, he's got this obsession, but she is linked with the reason he is now in the position he's in. And so, maybe. Like, yeah, maybe it's never stated, but like that, to me, that's how I sort of take some of this stuff, like, and I think that sort of comes with it. But you're right about that scene when he says, like, have you ever loved anyone? They're not loved back. Because then when it pans to Mace and she's like, yeah, you fucking idiot.
but that's actually, I mean, I think it's pretty subtly done. You don't get her, Angela Bassett, making goo eyes and the camera, close up of,
She has unrequited, she has unrequited feelings for him, but that does not mean she's going to give him an inch. Like, she gives him a panning like every time, but not rightfully so. But partly because she wants him to be better. Like, she's acting to make him better. She wants him to be, because I think one of the things, you see a flashback of when she first meets him, and he's, there's been a killing. I think it's her husband or whoever's killed in a drug shooting, and he goes into the house and he finds like Lenny sat there with her son, sort of like keeping him calm and this other stuff, and it's sort of, they build this relationship out of that, and he's obviously a friend to the family following that. So like, she knows that there's good in him, and it's that, I know it's cliched, but it's never although it's sort of cliched, it's never dealt with as a cliche in this film. Like, they don't sort of go that, in fact, that line's never there. Like, other films would be like, I know there's good in you, you have to reach inside and find that good. Like, she's more like, no, you're a prick and you need to stop being a prick. And so
I love that point about the line, and I just want to point out that, I mean, you see, like, okay, he's another good cop, right? Because he cares to talk to this black kid, right? Sit him down and care about what he's feeling. But it also, the fact that he's remained friends with that family also suggests, like, at the same time, that is what makes Mace fall in love with him, right? He's a good guy. But it also suggests his the frequency with which he crossed lines.
Yeah.
Because, you're not supposed to, get that closely involved permanently with a suspect's family,
Yeah, so I totally agree. But also sort of it hints at his attachment. Like, he gets attached to a lot of things, and that sort of, but again, like, this is why I love this film, because it never tells you anything, but you get hints at things. Like, you can build up characters in this, and again, this is why I think this film flopped, because it's not an action, adventure, sort of like, this isn't an actual. This is, in many cases, like, there are moments of character study, and interspersed with good action scenes. There's some good, there's some interesting bits and pieces. There's a pretty good car chase, and the fight at the end's pretty good. Looks great, but it's not, it's not those other films. And I like that you keep getting these glimpses of what these characters are, or what they have been, or what they could be, and the fact that, again, like Mace, when you see her turn up at, and again, it's never stated, it's never in clunky fucking dialogue in any of this film. She turns up following this shooting. She's in a diner waitress's costume outfit. And it says it's on, I don't know how many years it is before, but then you now know, since then, she is now trained to be a bodyguard. She has her own limousine. She has clientele. She's running her own business. Like, her husband was killed, and she didn't mope about it and feel like, no, she's like, Mace has stepped in and done something about it. And again, and there are other films where there would be that dialogue of like, you made something of your life, you stepped up and you protected your family. Like, it doesn't need to be said because they know it. And it's shown in the film that she's become a very competent woman. Like, she's competent, she's independent, and it doesn't need to be stated. It just is.
Well, also, I mean, it's interesting, I mean, Catherine Bigelow's role is interesting here. Here we have a female director in a time when that was even more of a rarity than today. And here we have this strong woman character, and the movie never puts a spotlight on her and says she's a strong woman. And even in her action scenes, where, you know, she's kicking ass, she doesn't seem invulnerable. There's never, you know, the superhero stance, you know, like, you know, it just avoids all of those cliches.
And I love it for it. And it makes me love the character of Mace all the more in this film. Like, you know, she is definitely one of my favorites. And I think that weirdly, and this is something I found baffling when I was reading the reviews for this film on those aggregate sites. No, well, I wanted to because I went on because I enjoyed this film and I wanted to go on and see what does it have on IMDb, and then how does that sort of translate into the written reviews. The amount of people that referred to this film as misogynistic and then didn't really give an example or justification. Like, this is a sick, misogynistic film. And I'm like, I'm not sure how or what you've been watching, but I don't consider this film to be misogynistic in that in any more so than other action films.
Right. Yes. Well, that is the point. Yeah, I mean, there are times watching it where, I mean, this is another aspect that we haven't talked about is the snuff film quality, you know, and the sort of BDSM, you know, recording snuff films, putting the recorder on the victim's head so she can witness the killer's joy.
Raping.
At raping and killing with a X-Acto knife. I mean, this is some dark shit, right? Especially for mainstream Hollywood. I wouldn't say especially for 95 because, you know, there were a few, I mean, this is post Basic Instinct. I mean, you know, but, you know, in which this stuff, I mean, I would say not especially for 95 because I think we're way more repressed today, especially about sex. You know, and weirdly because, you know, of the left as much as the right, you know, it's not the Catholic League anymore. It's instead voices on the left criticizing, you know, and so I can see there are times watching this movie when I sort of have that concern when I'm thinking like, oh God, Juliette Lewis is like being gagged and raped on camera. You know, it's like and Juliette Lewis has got to, I mean, she moves like a snake on stage, by the way. Amazing. You know, singing performance. I mean, stunning. I mean, the fact that she did not become, you know, a rock star in real life or something is also shocking.
Well, she has got a band and sort of stuff, but I think it's a bit too, again, left of mainstream to have caught on. But her performances are great. I've seen a couple of those.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, there are moments where you're like,
yes,
these women, you know, this is directed by a woman, but a lot of women are wearing skimpy outfits. There's a lot of prostitution. There's a lot of rape, bind, torture, kill kind of stuff.
There is, but I would counter that by saying, like, you know, you said about this as being the down and out. You know, we live this is like we talked when we talked about Little Shop of Horrors. You talked about Skid Row. Like this is that sort of, like, you know, turn that into a 90s act. That type of, these aren't people.
I love that comparison. Like, you know, like Little Shop of Horrors. You know, the Catherine Bigelow version. I'll see what else I can fires in the back.
I'll see what else I can pull in from our back catalogue. But the point is, like, these are people that have to make money any way they can. Like, Iris is a prostitute, yeah, and so the fact she is a prostitute is a part of the plot. Like, she has to be in that role, and so the clothing is sort of part and parcel. But the point is, again, like with Juliette Lewis on stage, like, you know, she's in this nightclub owned by Philo. Sex sells. The point is, like, yeah, the film's showing this, but I could also go to a nightclub in any main city that's doing this, and I would actually see this on stage. So it's not wrong. It's not excessive. And I would say as well, the acts of violence against women in this film, especially the rape and killing of Iris, the way it's shot as well, though, isn't glorified. Like, it is gross. Like it's there to make you feel uncomfortable. It's not one of those films. It's not one of those. I want to be careful here. It's not one of those Hollywood rape scenes where it's done for titillation, or it's done whether you can go, well, she was sort of into it, which makes me feel ill even saying that. This is a killer, a rapist and a killer committing an act, a violent act. And again, like I said about the start of the film, where you live through this robbery, the point of the clips thing is like, and this is why I actually think this is quite good. They are going to throw you as a viewer into this and make you feel massively uncomfortable. And again, you have to be Lenny. This is the point of this. Like you, because Lenny has to go through this, and this is a woman he knows, and and this other thing. It then sets you up for the reenactment with Juliette Lewis later on. But the point is that you are supposed to feel gross. This is a gross world, and this act is gross, and you as a viewer are supposed to feel gross. And I kind of, they could have, because what they could have done, again, and this is the thing this film doesn't do, they could have easily have had Ralph Fiennes wearing the squid, experiencing it, and then coming out and saying, doing his acting of like, oh, that's gross, oh, that's disgusting, and then saying and telling what he saw. He could have been like, Mace, this is what I've seen. I know where they were killed. It was a violent. They could have pulled back, and I guarantee that at one point they probably had that note, or there was a discussion about, do we have to show this? And it feels grubby and horrible. And I'm not to say I like it is wrong. I don't like it, but I appreciate that they make you feel uncomfortable. And again, I can see why, if you're sat in an audience and you've taken your date to this, and you're going, this isn't the
1995.
This isn't the film the trailer was telling me I was about to watch. And so I sort of appreciate the guts for them to do it.
At that moment, does that reassure her or make her scared?
You're about to put your arm around. You go, no, not now.
Not the time. No, I agree with you. I mean, I'm just saying that there are those moments where I had that sort of, discomfort, Yeah. But having said that, I mean, look, I ultimately take the side that you're explaining now. It's also worth saying in that snuff film of Iris, it's actually incredibly restrained. So, first of all, there's no shot in which he turns to the side because it's a first-person POV device. You never see the long shot that can sort of glamorize, a man having sex with a woman. There's no that potentially could do that. He never turns to the side and looks in a mirror and gives you that sort of thing. The other thing is, even from, which might tend to glamorize, even from a first person point of view, the film doesn't show him looking down. No. In fact, it doesn't show him, so it doesn't show not just the penetration, but also the penetration of the X-Acto knife. In fact, it's so restrained that at the end of it, I'm not sure that there's sex or murder or which one I just watched. And I have to have Ralph Fiennes say he raped and killed her for me to be like, oh, I guess both happened there. Because the camera doesn't.
No, and again, they could have gone a lot more graphic, and it isn't at all. But one of the things, again, I'll say is, because it's from a POV shot, it's done very claustrophobic as well. It's not done on a bed. It's not done on a bed. It's not done again on a sofa or anything like that. It's done under a sink in a bathroom. Like he chases her down, traps her down, cuts, and the X-Acto knife. He doesn't kill her. Sorry, I should say he doesn't kill her with the X-Acto knife. He strangles her. He strangles her. And this is when I apologize to any listeners. He basically, because I think, because it is the way this whole act is disturbing and fascinating. Is that this squid technology, this thing they can put in your head, so you can experience what somebody else's sensory things. I'm curious as to how that works, because it obviously plugs into the brain. Okay. So you get vision. He says it. You get vision, you get sounds, you get smells, and you get feel. So one of the things I'm curious about is, okay, so if it's reading these impulses from the brain, there's obviously as a victim, because again, Fiennes actually says this when he talks about one of the other clips about two college girls or whatever, about, basically he hires some model looking dude to basically sort of wear this stuff and then go sleep with a woman, because it's not just the visuals, you get the physical reactions.
You mentioned, like you could feel sex as a woman.
Exactly.
Wouldn't you be interested in?
So as a victim, what you are getting is you are being forced to experience the physical thrill, pleasure of the person committing the act on you, and that confusion and panic and like that horrified me, absolutely horrified me when that was happening, because I'm like, that must be, because you see it, then it's depicted with Ralph Fiennes where he's sat in the back of the car showing it, and he shows like he is revolted, but you can see that there's a physical reaction, like he's like, I don't want to feel, there's clear pleasure in this, but I'm trying not to because I'm revolted by what I'm seeing, and this dichotomy of sort of sensations. To have them be as a victim, to have to go through that, and he uses the knife for fear. Like you can see he waves it in front of his own eyes because she's blindfolded, but she can clearly see this knife through his eyes, and then he uses it to cut her t-shirt, and then uses the t-shirt to strangle her whilst he rapes her. And yeah, it's when I say I watched this 1.5 times, that's one of the scenes where I'm like, yeah, I don't want to see that again. Like, it's really hard viewing because it's so claustrophobic, it's so disturbing, but it's not graphic, it's not glorified, it's not done for titillation in any way, and so when it is reenacted later on Faith,
right, and there he uses a belt instead of the strangle,
and you think that's going to be the thing, and you realize that is being done for pleasure, and it shows that thing. Like, I am gutted. Like, it really bothers me because they do that thing where he turns to the side and it's the reveal that it's Max is actually sleeping with Faith, and it is actually done for pleasure.
And he hasn't killed.
And
at that point, you don't know how into it she is, right? I mean, she's resisted, but is that...
Well, weirdly, because the thing is, and this is the bit that makes it even grosser for me, is when he does it to Faith with the belt and everything, and he lets her go. He has concern because he says to her, "Are you all right? Did it hurt?" And she's like, "No." And she's clearly she's gotten off on it as well. And it just makes
that she has.
Well, no, I think she has. I take it as like she's engaged in this relationship with Max now, and she's into his kink, and I think she knows. If anything, I still think she knows that Max killed Iris. And I think she's sort of slightly into this, and so that makes me even more gutted towards the end, where they're like, yeah, this thing of like Max is vile in this, but I'm going
to go off on a rant when you're done.
No, go for it. Go then. Go.
I mean, I can make the misogynist argument, right? I mean, the argument for misogyny in this film. I mean, you just said, I mean, the only, the Faith is getting off on her best friend's rape and murder, knowing that the guy who did it, it's a sort of like, I mean, women secretly want this kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can make this argument. Having said that, I think you're right that these depictions of women as being exploited, as exploitable, as in a society that tolerates all of this, is absolutely clear. Faith is not happy, you find out, in these different relationships, and was trapped by fear. You see her being hit. This is a society, this is a depiction of life in which the exploitation of the commodification of women's bodies as objects for male sexual gratification and as objects that can be controlled through violence is part of this world and is not depicted glowingly. Even the extent to which it would be in like most Bond films or action films where you see the villain slap a girl, and that's how you know he's a bad guy. And yet it's shot from a distance. He still looks glorious doing it, he's powerful. This guy just seems like a scumbag when he does it. So I would say that, I mean, the other thing I would say, and I think this is elaborating on what you've also said, I mean, I enjoy, and I am an staunch advocate of transgression in cinema and in art. The history of art has been made by transgressive art, frankly. And I think we have less of it today than we did in the 90s. And, to your point, it's not depicted in a way that says, this is good, go out and try this. Or, I mean, the reality is that people, and I will say, I mean, there is this problem that we today, rant continues, confuse depiction with approval.
Yes.
Everybody understands that in a serial killer, in a slasher movie, you're not endorsing going to holiday camps and slashing co-eds, right? But there's something about like, a serial killer killing a prostitute that, people say it's a misogynistic thing. Well, I mean, this also gets into the point that this is part of human nature. And we are, violent animals. And, sex is kinky. And, this is an extreme, obviously. But if you're right that that Faith is into it, him showing what's called aftercare, if that really is consensual, and I don't know if it's consensual because she attacks Max. But I think that gets to the nuanced portrayal of like the bad choices women have to make in this world. Oddly, we live in a culture today that is less tolerant of consensual kink and transgressive cinema and confuses depiction of things with assent.
Yeah. No, I agree. I absolutely, totally 100% agree. And one thing the two things I mention is, firstly, about the Faith attacking Max, is it's you see one of the things that's again, this film is nuanced, and I think people don't don't quite get it. I'm not saying people don't get it. That sounds really patronizing and stupid, but it's clear, like, she keeps telling Lenny to leave her alone. She's like, it's over, Lenny. Like, you've got to sort of like back off. Don't come back and see me. Don't come back and see me. He says it. She says it again and again. But whenever she says it, like, it's clear that she's actually she's calling out for help. Like, when she's with Philo and other times, like, she's basically saying, back off, because when you're around, I get a slap in the mouth. So and
you're going to get yourself killed.
And so she's trying to protect him. So there's clearly there's still feelings and emotion there. And it's this thing of, again, I think with Max at the end, she sort of knows what Max is up to. I clearly think she knows more than she lets on. And it's not until he puts a gun in Lenny's face that she's like, oh, this is real, and someone I care for is going to get hurt. And that's when sort of she's like, no, you can't do that. And she sort of jumps on Max's back. So for that, I think, again, it's really well done, because she clearly has feelings for Max. Like, they are, maybe it's just physical. I don't know. But she's willing to sacrifice that to save Lenny. But the other thing I would say, this thing about sort of, and I 100% agree with this, that what you say, depiction being approval. This thing of just because you show something in a film, shows you approve it, drives me mental. It drives me absolutely mad. And I recently watched Straw Dogs. Hadn't seen it before. Watched it a couple months ago, and that's got some brutal stuff in it. That's got pictures of rape and home invasion and all this other stuff. And like, you go, at the end, that's again is a film that you go, yeah, I feel oddly uncomfortable at the end of this film. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to take some of these characters and some of these interactions. Like, I've got to really think about this. But that does not mean that the film's saying that the wife character in that is into the rape or that the Dustin Hoffman character sort of like, glorifies killing people as home protection. No. But and I think that, if that film was done today, it was done relatively recently, it was awful, but if something like that is done again today, like, you have these things that either it gets depicted as extreme horror, sort of like Martyrs style or something like that, Or you get this thing of like, this film is, and you get it, the cancel culture comes out and tries to rail on it. And I do think that we've lost this element of nuance in art where you can go, yeah, we can be complicated, dirty, violent creatures when we need to be, and I think it's a shame that we have lost some of that. But you're right, this film has that as well.
Well, I mean, to get to your point, we can be nuanced in art, but we can also be nuanced in these conversations.
Mhm.
And I do want to say, I have read and enjoyed a lot of these very same thought pieces, think pieces that we are apparently condemning here. I am totally open to reading a condemnation of something as racist or misogynistic, even if I don't agree with it. I like reading that point of view. Having said that, I also want to say that there is a double standard. I mean, I do think there are ways in which you can depict a rape or something sexual in a way that is glamorizing it, or that doesn't seem to be judging the person doing it. But I do want to say, we live in a culture in which sex is the problem. But we can, you and I like action movies. We can watch, Bruce Willis slaughter 1,000 people, and he's, looking stoic and badass doing it, and there's no condemnation. No, but, we can watch so much violence and guts hanging out of people. I mean, I watch a lot of this stuff online, there's just people being gutted and beheaded, and it looks cool, and it's Zack Snyder, and it's not in slow motion, and the blood is so beautiful. And then you see somebody have sex in a way that is aggressive, or that you are left thinking, I don't know if that was fully consensual, or how do we understand? Let's have that conversation. Or even things that shouldn't be that shocking, and that gets condemned to something that, and I'm not saying that somebody can't be triggered by that, but I'd also point out there are a lot of families that have lost people to gun violence who can't go and watch a Schwarzenegger film, happily. So it's not that people aren't triggered by that either.
No, I agree. The weird thing about sex on screen is not, and I have had this thought before, which maybe sort of, I don't know whether it will say anything about me. I'm going to try and articulate it in a way that doesn't sound weird.
Everything we've said tonight sounds weird.
Yeah, that's very true. Sex on screen comes in two ways, and I find it interesting. This thing that there will be a moment in a film, and I think we, again, I'm going to make reference to a previous film. We talk about Demolition Man. In Demolition Man, Sandra Bullock's character makes a point following an action scene that it includes elevated endorphins and so will result in sex, and they have that virtual reality thing. And so again, that is a real trope. It's a bit of it's a satire we didn't really it's a trope we didn't really focus in on in our discussion, but this thing in action films of action scene between male and female, or then equals sex, and you get two kinds of sex scenes. You either get the Terminator is a good example. Terminator 1, they're all chased down. They've just seen a police station absolutely obliterated. Arnie's gone through and destroyed all these people. They escape with this by the skin of their teeth. And then they go to a police station, and they are all sort of heart pounding, and they make love. Okay, and it's depicted in a sort of romanticized and a passionate way, and it's sort of they have the rousing music, and it'll end with the hands clasping, that kind of thing, right? And you get to not see the scene. It's maybe a little bit of titillation, but it's done in shadow, and you see sheets moving and all that kind of crap. And that's what you're going to see, because then you'll get the other side when there is that moment of passion, and it's going to be that rough sex, and it will be depicted by them clasping, falling over, and then it'll cut to the end, and they're like, we can't show that, cut, let's just show them smoking a cigarette after, or
but
getting
you
dressed.
know what happened here.
Exactly. Do you know what I mean? And that's the same
Yeah.
thing. It's that thing about sex. There's a real panic of like, we have to show it being tender. We can show it being tender and all this other stuff, but we can't show it unless it's being done for almost comedy effect or something like that. So more recently in Suicide Squad, they had a similar thing with Harley Quinn, and it's being done for comedy effect. You can do it for that, but you can't do it for.
Also, you can do that also because the woman is more of the initiator and more aggressive than the man, and that is safer culturally now than the reverse.
Which is fine, and I'm happy with that. But I just find it interesting that they have to show sex as being this sort of like intimate, romanticized thing, and they're happy with that. But the moment it becomes a bit of like, as we would like to refer as kids as bonking, it becomes distasteful or something. So they can't sort of show that on screen, or it leans into sort of the pornographic or whatever. And I do think that Hollywood still has real problems with this. Of like, how do we depict this? Oh, everyone knows the shorthand is, next day smoking a cigarette, or next day making breakfast or whatever. We can deal with that.
Yeah, and yet we have all seen people's noses, especially men. Because if we're going to talk about gender, imagine a woman's nose being cut off in slow motion on film. Oh my God. But you could show a guy's nose being cut off and sinew and stuff. And we've all seen that 20 times,
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that, also, to sort of potentially wrap this point, this is part of this matrix in this film of, race is part of this matrix, exploitation of women and women's lack of good options, and sexualization is part of this matrix in which of society that this film is depicting. And I think it depicts it well. I don't think that it is, look, there are shots in Blade Runner that are more, titillating than, most of the so-called titillating stuff here. But I also think that, to return to the sci-fi point, the idea that you're using these squids and these memories as that's going to go into home invasion, into robberies, but also into, sex, experiencing, another gender, which is presented as something that a normal man would desire to feel, by the way. So, which I think is also progressive and open. But that would inevitably go to sort of snuff films and the experience to have this visceral thrill of murdering somebody, raping somebody without having to do it and feel bad in the same way. That is a logical progression of this technology and its black market trade. And so that is not at all gratuitous. And that it seems to me that is clearly part of the core of how this plot started.
Oh yeah, no, yes, and it would not. When you sort of, there's a scene where Lenny is with a client early on, and it's some businessman, and he goes through, and the guy, he's sort of like, he's like, "What are you into? What do you want to do?" And the guy's reluctant to tell him, and Lenny says to him, like, "Look, right now, I'm your therapist. I'm your priest. Like, if you want to get the best out of this, like, you are going to have to tell me your kink." Like, Lenny's like completely non-judgmental. Like, he doesn't really care. He's just like, "You're paying for it. Do what the fuck you want." And he goes through those things. Do you want to experience sex as a woman? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? And then obviously, then we see him pay this guy in a bar to go and sort of pick up a chick and that sounds really derogatory. Then pick up a woman and go and have sex with her, so he can then have the experience. And that goes into his catalogue of experiences. It would not surprise me in the slightest if there is, much like if you were to go on any of those sort of like, Pornhub or I haven't got a list. I don't know them.
Never been to any of them.
Yeah, but these things where they have like role play. There will be so it would not surprise me if Lenny's going, right, put this squid on. You're going to pretend to be having forced sex, or you're going to pretend to have this relationship, and then you're gonna have this thing. It's gonna be some of it's gonna be role play, and then someone gets to experience that. So, like you say, it's an inevitable direction of this entertainment. Yes, there will be some sporting ones. I'm sure there's climbing ones where someone's like, I want the thrill of climbing a mountain. I want the thrill of hang gliding. Yeah, but I also want the thrill of but there'll also be the sex side of it. Inevitable. Let's be clear, sex, as we've sort of said, sex sells. Sex is also the reason we got VHS over Betamax.
That's right. As a reason, Laserdisc struggled.
Yeah.
We could have been playing Laserdiscs for years, like in Demolition Man. The reason that didn't come to pass is they wouldn't license porn until they were, it was way too late. And also, go back to cave art, right? Yeah. We are horny animals. Yeah. And we're violent animals. And I don't think that these things should be excluded. I mean, art has always struggled with this. For God's sake, if they depicted, if half of ancient Greek plays were made today, it would be like, these women are treated as commodities. Yeah, that's right. Are they aware of that? Is that being, discussed? And also we can say that and still say, and I do think that a lot of these criticisms are made intelligently and are not knee-jerk, condemnations that they can say there's a lot that's good, there's a lot to recommend this, but I'm uncomfortable with this. And I do want to, again, underline that, I want these female voices of criticism as part of this discussion, and they've made me a better critic by reading and able to see another point of view. And you and I are products of, the culture that we are, and part of it was a 90s culture in which this was part of that matrix. And we could try to escape those values and be better than those values, but we are not free of any of these concerns. Having said that, that doesn't invalidate our point of view. And we deserve a part of that conversation too, as long as we make room for other voices.
I agree, and that's not saying I don't want to put them down, but I think one of the things you said there, which is really important, is I want them to be informed and intelligent criticism, and I've got no problem with someone coming to a film or a book or a comic or even music or anything and saying, I'm not happy with this, or I'm uncomfortable with this because of this. And I've listened to this, or I've experienced this, or I've seen this, or I've read it. I have no problem with that. In fact, I love that because of what you just said, is it gives me another point of view. And there's been a number of times I've read a review and I've gone, I've never thought of that. That's a really good point. And it's changed my interpretation of some content. However, I also know that, we live in an era of clickbait, where there are a bunch of crap articles where they just go, what's the general consensus of this thing? Oh, it's this. Right, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon, and you get crap. So I know there's those as well, and that fuels this sort of like cycle of things. So I agree.
An overreaction on both sides. I mean, You and I both don't like the macho guy, shutting down and doxing and all of this, anti-female nonsense that's going on that side. I mean, I feel utterly, I have no home. I like art. I like these conversations. I like informed conversations, but both sides, there are, especially on social media, a big part of this. You're right about clickbait and, what gets those headlines and what you click, retweet on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you say one of the ironies of this film, and actually I will say of the director, Catherine Bigelow, who, I say I haven't watched all of her films, but this is a good one. I think it gets overlooked. I actually will get that when we get to the final reviews. But don't forget, she also made Point Break, which is one of those sort of like most homoerotic macho films ever. Love that film. It's amazing. And so this thing of sort of like, this idea of sort of like, the macho characters and stuff like, she's good at that. Have you ever seen The Hurt Locker? It's great.
Oh yeah.
She's done some. She gets male ego. She gets that sort of thing. Like, she gets it. She's very good. And so I do hate this thing of sort of like, they can't do this, or I don't know if there is this thing of like female directors or whatever. It's like I find it uncomfortable. They're like, oh, it's great that like a female director directed Wonder Woman. Yeah, great, not a problem. Wonderful. Patty Jenkins is pretty good. 1984 was terrible, but the first one was great. Yeah, great. Let's have her then deal with some other characters. Like, I'm happy to have. Who was it? Recently there's been others where I'm like, I'm excited for like Eternals. These other you and I have said it before. Other voices coming in and doing other characters. Like women don't have to direct women characters. Like,
yes.
Do you mean they can do anything? I want to hear that story. Like, I want that thing. And
this is also part of this weird sort of censorship today, or this weird sort of like, I mean, you said you can't do this. The moment I hear that about art, I think, you're Nazis. I mean,
exactly.
You can't do this. You can't depict this. I mean, and I hear these arguments, and I just think, you have no role in a democracy. Frankly, and that goes for the right or the left. Now that you should depict this responsibly. You should depict this thoughtfully. You obviously have not given thought to how this kind of incident really goes down. Yes, very good point. Absolutely. Let's have those discussions. But you said, pointing out Wonder Woman and the way we've kind of commodified these other voices. I think, you and I both want that diversity. But, to say, I do think that, we have conversations about cultural appropriation, and, there's a version of that I'm very sensitive to, but there's also a version of that says, white guy can't direct black subject matter. Look, if a studio's looking for a director for a movie, a script that it's already got that occurs on an Indian reservation or Native American reservation, get a Native American director. Absolutely. Having said that, there are great stories like that were not written or directed by a Native American, and that is okay too. And like you said, I mean, I want those voices, but I don't think that Wonder Woman, while Catherine Bigelow's gender, her experiences inform this movie, and I think for the better, and I can guess at how that's true. The movie is the movie, and I'm still, a new critic in the sense that the movie is what it is. It is ultimately as good as it is, and I can't forget that it has a particular director, but, Wonder Woman is a good movie, no matter who made it.
Yes.
It so happens it was informed by, the director and her experience, but it's still a good movie. I'm going to shut up.
No, I agree. No, you are right. And I think it's something that we have talked about and we'll talk about again, I think, for different directors. Right, looking at the time, then, I think what we're going to draw this to a close. I think we've just done a really good, I think we've delved into this quite a lot, actually. So, here we go then. So, Julian, final thoughts and, of Strange Days.
I think I like this movie even more having talked about it with you for 2 hours. I was quite impressed with it. I mean, I do think it's a bit of a splendid mess, but what a masterpiece. And both the transgressive content, the nuance, the inability to just spell things out. I mean, there are a few action tropes. I mean, I do like the cutting of the tie, I mean, it's a good action. It's an action trope kind of thing, but it's good. It knows the tropes that it's, as you pointed out. But I mean, even this is an ambitious, aggressive, brave movie, not without faults, but I really admire it.
No, I'm the same. This is a film I came across sort of on TV, and I think like you, I didn't see all of it at once. Now I've got it and I've watched it a couple of times and stuff. I love this film. I think it's brave, it's ambitious. I think it's. I love the fact it doesn't tell you everything. There's information in there that you can go back and you can pick up. I like the fact that the characters are nuanced and don't always do what you think they're going to do. and the relationships feel honest and real, and this sort of thing. And it's so sort of refreshing to not watch those action tropes. I love action films, I know I do, but it gives a different twist on these things. And so this is like a big recommend for me. I was looking anyone to go and check it out. It's not hard to find. Go find it. But yeah, no, Strange Days. I'm so glad we got to talk about this film as well, because I think it's been a big win for us, really. So anyway, yes, we'll wrap up there on Strange Days, and the next film we're going to do, probably less nuanced, is Event Horizon. So we're going into space with Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne. But anyway, this has been great. So I really appreciate the conversation, Julian, as always. It's been really cool.
It's been a thrill for me. At Pod Time Space on Twitter, and visit the Patreon.
Yes, go find us. Come tell us what you think, because this was a real divisive film. It's controversial, so come tell us at Pod Time Space. Come and tell us what you think about it, and go check out the Patreon. As Julian said, it's patreon.com/20cg media. I've got all kinds of bit of pieces on there. But one of the big things we're doing, obviously, Julian and I are working our way through the Twilight Zone, trekking through the Twilight Zone, we're calling it. And we are doing some fantastic discussions on there as well. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, yes, thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll catch you on the Event Horizon.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.